Hello, BookTube. I did a little used book shopping today with Frida in tow, even though it was raining, just because I felt like I was losing the knack for it. But I also got a mail haul. So I thought I would interleave the two of them together and we would alternate between new and old. Do try to keep up. We'll start with this great big thing. Oh my god, it's so heavy that I feel certain it's more than one book. Because I have these things pretty well known and pretty well timed. I can't imagine, this feels like a 1,200 page book. I can't imagine one of those getting to me without me knowing it ahead of time. So I'd be willing to bet this is more than one book. Oh, yeah, it's two books. It's two books. Oh, okay. First one. Let's see if we have a cover mock-up. No, we don't. Okay. This is by Andrea de Robelant, and it is Autumn in Venice. Ernest Hemingway and his last muse. Who apparently didn't do any better a job than the first 20 muses, but we won't hold that against her. Something you can't make bricks without straw. The acclaimed author of A Venetian Affair. A Venetian Affair was so good. That's our author. The photographer took a picture of him there in Venice. I've been in that exact spot. I can tell you exactly where he is, and I can tell you the whole history of that hallway. The photographer clearly took his picture and then said, once more, with more of the insufferable. That's okay. Authors tend to do that. It gives us the remarkable story of Hemingway's love affair with both the city of Venice and the muse he found there, a vivacious 18-year-old who inspired the man 30 years her senior to complete his great final work. Oh, God, they're going for Hollywood. And they could easily do it. That would be a good story to do. Hemingway in Venice, just in general, would be a good story to do for Hollywood. In the fall of 1948, Ernest Hemingway and his fourth wife traveled to Venice for the first time, which Hemingway called an absolute goddamn wonderful city. Okay, that's incorrect, right? Comma, which means that the thing he would have been referring to would have been the first time, not the city. But that's still, he raved about Venice. He was a year shy of his 50th birthday and hadn't published a novel in nearly a decade. At a duck shoot in the lagoon, he met and fell in love with Adriana Ivanic, striking Venetian girl just out of finishing school. And de Robelant, our author, whose great uncle moved in Hemingway's revolving circle of bon vivants, aristocrats, and artists, recreates with sparkling clarity this surprising years-long relationship. Great. Great. Fantastic. I've read about that relationship in Carlos Baker's biography of Ernest Hemingway and in the two Hemingway biographies that are much more recent than that. But here's a whole book devoted to it, Autumn in Venice. For the Hemingway fan, you may or may not know. And then the next one, this one gets me going. And we do have a mock-up of the cover for this one. This is Proust Duchess by Caroline Weber. The subtitle is How Three Celebrated Women Captured the Imagination of Fin de Siècle Paris. I love saying it that way. Okay, but we don't. Do we have anything else to elucidate? Yeah, there we go. From the acclaimed author of Queen of Fashion, a brilliant look at the glittering world of turn of the century Paris through the first in-depth study of the three women Proust used to create his supreme fictional character, the Duchess de Guermantes. Wow. Okay, well, this is huge. And Caroline Weber is a professor of French and comparative literature at Barnard College, Columbia University. She also taught at the University of Pennsylvania and Princeton. And she's written all over the place. She's written in a slew of places, and she lives in New York City. And I want to review this. This comes out in May. Oh, I'm sorry, that is not what it looks like. It looks like that. As I'm sure I've made clear on this channel before, I don't particularly care for Proust. And I did eventually plow my way entirely through Remembrance of Things Past, and to put it mildly, it's not the book for me. But this sounds fascinating, and really, it's two books about authors inspired by women who haven't had their due in the spotlight. So that's kind of fascinating right there. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised. Wait, what do you got here? May and June, I wouldn't be surprised if there's an editor or two out there who groups these two together. Again, they'll get them in the mail. They'll all get them just like I did. Maybe that'll happen. And then an old book. One of the old books I found today. John Keegan's The First World War in a UK Pimlico trade paperback. I love Pimlico trade paperbacks. I wish I had them all. And this is just a standard, soup to nuts narrative history of the First World War. John Keegan is a famous, for those of you who might not know his name, he's a famous popular military historian. Very good with a turn of phrase. Very good with personal insights. You have to watch him just a bit on the details. I get the strong impression that after his first couple of really successful books, he started farming out a lot of the research to grad students. I could be wrong about that, but I get the strong impression that that's true. Or maybe as he grew more and more prominent in my attention, I just paid closer scrutiny to what he was writing. But the reason that I got this is because the First World War in the American hardcover and trade paperback is oversized. I've lost track. You've probably seen it on the Infinite Library tour of Richardson Reads, but it's oversized. It's bigger and wider, and this is just a normal sized book in the Pimlico trade paperback. Oh, how I wish I had them all. But anyway, so that's an old book. Now we go back to a new one. This thing here, also fairly heavy. Could be a finished copy. What have we got here? Nope. Oh, fantastic. Oh, this is called The Moralist. It's by Patricia O'Toole. Woodrow Wilson and the World He Made. Big, thick thing. A big, thick book about Woodrow Wilson. Fantastic. Oh, boy. I'm greatly looking forward to reading this, even though, again, as with Proust and with Hemingway, I'm no fan of Wilson. This is turning out accidentally to be a perfect illustration of why I love biography, because I can get schoolboyishly excited about something even if it's not someone I really like. All right, this is not a pub sheet. This is just the author's note. This is just an essay from the author. I'm not sure what I think about a book that needs an author's note that long. But anyway, this comes out in April. President from 1913 to 1921. And you all know who he beat. Wilson set a high bar for himself and the country. No president believed more fervently in the primacy of morality in politics or the moral force of ideas. The Moralist measures Wilson by his own standards as it recounts his unprecedented success with Congress, his grand vision of a peaceful world order, and his moral blind spots on race, women's suffrage, and free speech in wartime, and a monumental final defeat that was largely self-inflicted. The League of Nations. This gets all my spider senses going. I think this might be a really good... It might be the Wilson book that I really wish Scott Berg's biography had been a few years ago and wasn't. Maybe though, Berg is such a great biographer that maybe if I come across a hardcover of his Wilson book, I got it, I read it, I didn't like it at all. I think I reviewed it negatively, and then I got rid of it. And if I were to come across it again, secondhand, I would probably get it and reread it, just because it always strikes me as weird when a practiced biographer just falls flat on his face. Although it does happen. I've seen it happen. Not, of course, famously with Ron Chernow, but also, who's the other name I'm thinking of? John Meacham. John Meacham's book about the first President Bush, which was eloquent, but entirely uncritical. So it does happen, but I want to give it a try. But this I have great hopes for, and I also hope to review it. And then we go to an old book. It's one we've seen on this channel before. It is also a huge biography. It's this. Believe it or not, it's William Shawcross's official biography of the Queen Mother, Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. And you saw it just a little while ago. I held up UK trade paperback of this same biography that had one of those covers where there's a front cover with a hole that shows the second cover. And I remember I was saying I was going to use, I had it on my nightstand for a while. I was rereading with great delight. I was rereading chunks of it. And I was going to use it as sort of a beat up working copy for consulting that book. But as is always the case with those covers, the ones with the cutout shape that opens to another cover, it ripped apart in no time at all. I need books to be solid, and this is a brick. It weighs a ton, and it's got the matte cover and the decal edges. And it was a song. It was dirt cheap, so I had to get it, even though I already have a couple of copies. And then let's see here. How are we going to do this? We'll do another new one. This one's light as a feather. It probably won't be a 900-page biography. What we got here? Oh, great. Okay, this comes out in April as well. This is by Menno Schilthuizen. And it is Darwin Comes to Town. How the urban jungle drives evolution. And from what I can gather, that's what it's about. It's about evolution taking place not on the remote Galapagos Islands or in the jungles of Africa, but right under our noses, in real time, in the urban environments that now constitute a huge portion of the Earth. For a long time, biologists thought evolution was necessarily a slow process, too incremental to be observed in a lifetime. In Darwin Comes to Town, evolutionary biologist Menno Schilthuizen shows that evolution can in fact happen extremely quickly, and in the strangest of places, the heart of the city. Of course, the idea that evolution takes place incrementally and incredibly slowly and gradually was upset by Harvard's own Stephen Jay Gould, with the idea of punctuated equilibrium. I'm sure that will get, that's just cover copy. I'm sure that this guy is not going to claim that he's, hey, evolution might happen faster under some circumstances than others. I'm sure he's not going to do that and have the entire literary and scientific world show up at his doorstep. One with brass knuckles, one with a club, one with a baseball bat with nails in it, all waiting to take their place in line. Punctuated equilibrium. No, that's not it. I'm sure he's going to acknowledge that. I would tell you if he does, but I'm sure this thing doesn't have an index yet. No. Okay. Well, anyway, I think it's fascinating because, of course, I observe a lot of wildlife in the city. Jamaica Plain is part of Boston, and it's loaded with green space, but there's a lot of overlap. The animals that live in Forest Hill Cemetery have no idea that Forest Hill Cemetery is Forest Hill Cemetery. They know it's a part of a territory, and they wander all over. And same thing is true in all the rest of Boston, and I guarantee you in any city where you live. So this is fascinating to study. Comes out in April. I would love to review it. And then we'll finish up with two old books. The first one is this one. It's by Eric Burns, and it's called Infamous Scribblers. It's subtitled The Founding Fathers and the Rowdy Beginnings of American Journalism. And it's all about, that's all that it's about, journalism in the age of the American Revolution, including the Founding Fathers who were journalists and the Founding Fathers who hated journalists. The Founding Fathers who got the revolution going through grassroots journalism, and the Founding Fathers who wanted to crush an independent press. And I read this when it first came out and loved it. I'll see if I love it this much again a second time, because I'll read it this weekend. And its timing was just off. This came out in 2006, and in 2007, John Cotter and Sam Sachs and I created a literary journal called Open Letters Monthly, where we could review stuff just like this. Not them, of course. They don't read history, but I would have reviewed this in a heartbeat for Open Letters. But it was just a year too early. I read it and I really liked it, but I look forward to visiting it again now that I'm it's been 10 years now. I firmly have my book critic's hat stapled back onto my head. And the last book we'll do, another old one, is also a near miss. This came out in 1990, just a little bit, I think probably a month before I returned to Boston. and to the world, and to reading, and to thinking, and all that sort of stuff. Or I would have been all over it, like salt on tomato soup. It's this, An American Life, the autobiography of Ronald Reagan. That was, of course, the state of American presidential autobiographies is such that now the minute you hear the minute you mention a president's autobiography, first question anybody has is, "Oh yeah, who wrote it?" And in this case, it was a guy named Lindsay, who was a great journalist, he's a great wordsmith and hack, a deadline raconteur, the perfect guy really to sit with President Reagan and just listen to stories and ask questions. The perfect guy to say, okay, this is a touchy subject and your lawyer's not in the room and you're maybe wanting to talk about something else, but let me ask you, were you thinking this or were you thinking that? What were you actually thinking in that moment? He's the perfect guy to sit in your living room and ask you that question without you feeling threatened or trapped or interrogated or cross-examined or anything like that. And I read bits of this when I was very slowly getting my feet underneath me again. I read bits of this, but believe it or not, in all this time, I have not read the whole thing. Just organically, just sat down with it and read the whole thing from front to back, like a book. In all this time, I haven't done that. And that's crazy, because I love reading about the Reagan administration. And I wrote about the Reagan administration while the Reagan administration was happening. And this has been a gap in my reading. And the only reason it has been so is because I've just thought, well, you could go to the library and borrow a copy, but you're gonna write in it. The Reagan administration was the very last American presidential administration that I actually wrote about for money. That I was actually involved with on a day-to-day basis as a commentator, not just an observer. It was the very last one that was like that. Nobody. I was just about to say nobody pays me to write about politics these days, but that's not exactly true. An editor at the National in Abu Dhabi does occasionally like to take editorials from me on American politics. I don't know if he knows the floodgates that he's tipping on just a bit there, because I would love to do it, even though it's not good for you. It's really bad for you physically. It's really bad for you physically. You shouldn't do it, or not do it for more than a year. But my point is, I kept thinking, well, you were so involved with the Reagan administration, and you're so involved in the speculation about whether or not he would ever write a book and what it would be like, that if you borrowed a copy from the library, there's no way that you could stop yourself from annotating it heavily. And that usually doesn't bother me, although it horrifies quite a few of you. But in this case, it would be annotations that I would want to keep. I would want to refer to them. I knew I wanted a copy of my own. I knew I wanted my own copy of the book. And random chance has stopped me from finding it in all this time. With who knows how many dozens of copies of other things. But at the Brattle and the Goodwills and charity shops and other used bookstores, I've never come across this until today. So I had to get it. And it also is on the reading list for this weekend. So there you go. That is it's a mixed parentage mail haul. So we have Ronald Reagan, An American Life, his autobiography, and we have Infamous Scribblers by Eric Burns. Then we have Darwin Comes to Town, about Darwinian evolution taking place in cities in real time. Then once again, The Queen Mother by William Shawcross, which I actually do recommend for royal fans of you out there. Then Woodrow Wilson and the World He Made, The Moralist. Then The First World War by John Keegan in a Pimlico trade paperback. Oh, send me your Pimlicos. Then Proust Duchess, about the women who inspired him to write his insufferable long novel. And then Autumn in Venice, about the last woman to inspire Ernest Hemingway to his insufferable fiction. And there you go. So I notice right now how many of these things are huge. But I'll wrap this up for now, and I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.